Good morning, everyone. It is so unfortunate that I once again have to start one of our webinars with our message to combat hate. Last week's horrific murder of 8 people, primarily Asian women, in Atlanta, Georgia, was a continuation of a large increase of attacks that we have seen against the AAPI community, especially over the last year. The Asian American Pacific Islander Coalition of Wisconsin reports that more than 3,800 hate incidents have been committed against the AAPI community since the pandemic began. This increase in violent attacks against members of the Asian American and Pacific Islander community is a reminder of the racism and injustice that this community faces far too often, but isn't discussed often enough. Today, we're saying loud and clear, from ethnic jokes to outright racism, we must stop Asian hate in all its forms. We hope you'll join us in using your voice to support Milwaukee's incredible AAPI restaurants and businesses. Donate to AAPI organizations such as the AAPI Coalition of Wisconsin, Hmong American Women's Association, Japanese American Citizens League of Wisconsin, the Milwaukee Chinese Community Center, and the Milwaukee Muslim Women's Coalition. Now, in honor of Women's History Month and the many incredible women who are integral in Milwaukee's history, today we celebrate Mainza Tao, Assistant Deputy Director of the Wisconsin Housing and Economic Development Authority. As the daughter of refugees escaping persecution, she has dedicated her life to issues of equity and inclusion for underserved communities, people of color, and new Americans. Under Mainza's previous leadership as the Executive Director of the Hmong Wisconsin Chamber of Commerce, the organization has deployed business loans and provided technical assistance to underserved communities throughout Wisconsin, leveraging nearly $10 million in community financing for diverse-owned businesses. In her current role at WIDA, in which she was appointed by Governor Tony Evers, Mainza became the first Asian American to serve in an executive office. She also represents WIDA on the Governor's Council on Mental Health. Mainza is one of the 4 founders of Elevation, a grassroots organization to help elevate the visibility of Asian American professionals in Milwaukee. We applaud her incredible work to continue to uplift the AAPI community and make her stamp on Milwaukee's history. Now I'd like to go to the STAR report. I'm not sure this is the type of positive we want to see, but this is the first week that we will see a year-over-year percentage increase. As you know, this was the week last year that we went into shutdown and started to see this horrible stretch of low occupancies in closed hotels. With that being said, loosening restrictions did help the downtown to see a nice week-over-week growth in occupancy, ADR, and RevPAR this week. Overall, the downtown market grew 3.5% week over week. ADR grew $7.28, with RevPAR increasing $5.81. Transient growth was midweek, and we ran a midweek occupancy for the transient market of 21.2% compared to 17% last week. They also saw a nice uptick in ADR, growing from $93.10 last week to $99.46 this week. We are proud that Hotel Week may have had something to do with that growth. Group demand remained relatively flat, and the contract segment grew only slightly by 0.4%. The county also saw an increase in occupancy, ADR, and RevPAR as well week over week. Occupancy grew 4.9%, ADR by $4.11, and RevPAR by $5.59. We have lots of promising and positive news coming out of this week's Longwoods International Study. According to the latest report, 87% of American travelers now have travel plans in the next 6 months. This is the highest level that we've seen since March 2020. In addition, only 33% of travelers now say that COVID-19 will greatly impact their decision to travel in the next 6 months. This is the lowest level we've seen in over a year, even lower than the first week of the pandemic in March of 2020, when that number was at 35%. A little more than half the travelers currently feel comfortable traveling outside their communities, and a little more than half support opening their communities to visitors, both the highest levels since last May. I am confident that as vaccination numbers continue to grow and positive cases continue to decline, we'll see all of these statistics keep moving in the right direction. Remember, vaccinations. Vaccinations are so important. The only way to reach community immunity is to reach 80% vaccinated. Earlier this week, we released a new video featuring our Milwaukee hospitality community sharing their work in making our city a safe destination for meetings, conventions, leisure travelers, and many more events. I want to thank David Caruso of Dynamic Events by David Caruso for narrating the video, as well as Wisconsin Center CEO Marty Brooks, Medical College of Wisconsin's President and CEO Dr. John Raymond, Potawatomi Hotel and Casino CEO and General Manager Rodney Ferguson, Junior Volleyball Association's Director of Events Steve Bailey, Milwaukee Mitchell International Airport's Director Brian Dranzik, Lakefront Brewery's on-site business developer Dylan Mazurkiewicz, and our own Vice President of Sales, Leslie Johnson, for their contributions not only to this video, but to keeping our city safe. This video is available for you to share. If you have a group that is nervous about coming to the city, please reach out and we'll make sure to get this to you and some collateral that we're creating in conjunction with the Medical College of Wisconsin. Now we'd like to play the video.
Welcome to the city that's just right. Big enough that it has lots of space with plenty to do for your meeting or event, but small enough that it's accessible, manageable, and safe. A city that's putting your safety and comfort as our #1 priority. This is Milwaukee.
Milwaukee is an extremely special place, and I don't think I can overstate how important the safety of customers and staff is to the business owners in the city of Milwaukee. They want to provide a world-class experience for everyone who walks in their door, but they also want to make sure that they're doing it in a safe environment.
The health and well-being of your attendee is top of mind at Milwaukee's hotels. That's why they were some of the earliest adopters of thoughtful and safe cleaning practices. Milwaukee even boasts a growing number of hotels that have earned accreditation for their safety practices from the Global Biorisk Advisory Council, the industry gold standard. We at Visit Milwaukee really felt it was important for us to lead the charge and work with our partners so that travelers know that when they come to Milwaukee, they see and experience that we care about them.
The Wisconsin Center District is made up of 3 properties. It's the Wisconsin Center, the UW Milwaukee Panther Arena, and the Miller High Life Theater, all located within 6 blocks of downtown Milwaukee. We changed the air filtration system that we have in the building. We upgraded to MERV 13, which are hospital-grade air filters in all of our air handling units, and we also increased the amount of external fresh air that we're circulating within the building. Distance markers on the floors and plexiglass between you and a food and beverage staff member may look different, but the staff here will do everything and anything they can to make your experience memorable. We go by the credo of be bold, be proud, be experience obsessed. We have empowered our frontline staff to do whatever they can within reason to make sure that the guest is accommodated and leaves here being wowed.
Milwaukee has another secret weapon to keep you safe. It's home to one of the biggest academic hospitals in the country, the Medical College of Wisconsin, who has partnered with Visit Milwaukee to keep us on the cutting edge of research and safety.
During the pandemic, the Medical College of Wisconsin has become the trusted source of science and medical information. And our experts have partnered with leaders to make sure that employees and customers are safe. I recognize that people are going to be concerned about traveling again, but I want to make sure that you know that Milwaukee leadership is personally invested in the safety of our citizens and anyone who wants to visit the community.
And we wouldn't be inviting you here if all you could do was go from your hotel to your meeting and back. Right on the shores of beautiful Lake Michigan, Milwaukee has plenty of parks, hiking trails, and outdoor activities with no worry of overcrowding. We have some of the best restaurants in the world, an amazing nightlife, and a world-class art museum.
Dining in Milwaukee is safe right now. You're gonna find that staff members are doing their best, going out of their way to accommodate, make sure you guys are comfortable, and you're gonna find great food anywhere you go and a great time and great beer. I feel strongly that we've done it well here and have set a good example for other restaurants in the city. We kind of had to get creative again when we reopened, offering the greenhouses out on the patio. We started doing a date night in Bernie's Chalet. We do private dining in our tour room, which can come with a mini tour. People came here, had a good time, saw that we were doing it well, and now are seeing some return visitors confidently come here and be comfortable.
The mayor, the county executive, local leaders, health experts, all knew it was extremely important to establish a level of confidence of the city being safe. And we mirrored that same level of expectation. Each and every day, our guests sending comments in saying, so happy this place is safe and we can return with our friends. Potawatomi is a great place to have meetings. We can host it all. We have over 80,000 square feet of meeting space, from our large event center to our legacy ballroom, just a scenic view of the Menominee Valley from our boardroom up on the 19th floor.
And it's all easily accessible and convenient, from arriving to the city to getting around once you're here.
Passengers coming through Milwaukee have recognized the efforts that we've made in our cleanliness programs. Requirements of wearing a mask, through social distancing, through plexiglass installation, the UV handrail sanitizers, our air sanitizing that we have in our air handling units. One of the things that was ongoing prior to the pandemic was we were in the middle of refreshing some of our food and beverage and retail locations. So travelers coming through Milwaukee can get a little taste of that experience.
When you come to Milwaukee, you don't expect to see what you see. From a meeting planner standpoint, Milwaukee's probably my favorite city to work with. It has the small, big city feel where everybody is tightly connected. They do a really good job of bringing everybody together to help make it so, as meeting planners, we have what we need. They do a great job of just highlighting whatever is happening in the city to make it so people, when they come to Milwaukee, can truly experience the things that we have. It is a very community-type feel here, which makes people coming in feel comfortable and want to come back.
Give us a call and see what Milwaukee can do to make your next meeting or event safe, successful, and spectacular. We look forward to seeing you soon.
That was amazing. I am so very proud of my team at Visit Milwaukee for putting that video together in conjunction with our agency of record, Hanson Dodge. Now I'd like to give a huge round of applause to Communications and Group Tour Manager Lindsay McKee and our graphic designer Alex Zimdars for putting together our beautiful new group tour guide. This is a must-have resource for our tour operators and travelers, filled with sample Milwaukee itineraries and tips on bringing groups to our region. Visit Milwaukee offered complimentary ads in this year's guide due to the pandemic, resulting in over 60 partner ads in the publication. This guide was emailed to our full list of group tour operators and will be personally provided to the group tour operators at trade shows that we're going to attend. You can download the full guide on our website, so please make sure to check it out. Advocate Aurora has a few $1 million worth of PPE donations, as well as some office supply and furniture available for donation as they continue to consolidate their offices. If you or anyone you know is interested in items, please contact Community Relations Senior Coordinator Eric Kennedy at Eric, and that's Eric with a K, .Kennedy@aah.org. More exciting news from our airport. United Airlines announced this week that they'll be adding new nonstop services from Milwaukee Mitchell International Airport to 5 popular leisure destinations on the south and east coast of the U.S. Beginning on May 28th and running through Labor Day weekend, United will fly nonstop from Milwaukee to Charleston, South Carolina, Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, Pensacola, Florida, Portland, Maine, and Savannah, Georgia. All 5 destinations have never had nonstop service from Wisconsin before. The new flights to each of these destinations will generally be offered twice per week for the entire summer. These new flights will give Milwaukeeans exciting new choices for their upcoming summer vacations and will provide travelers from these destinations the opportunity to easily choose Milwaukee for theirs. This Saturday from 10:30 to 5, Kind Oasis and Friends is partnering with Support Local MKE with a spring pop-up to celebrate and support local Milwaukee creators. This is a great opportunity to grab some gifts for friends and family or treat yourself to something new made by a local Milwaukeean. Milwaukee's acclaimed Ristorante Bartolotta dal 1993 has embarked on a culinary tour of Italy's regions with the Un Viaggio in Italia series, conceived by two-time James Beard award-winning chef Paul Bartolotta and executive chef Juan Urbieta. The tasting tour of Italy continues, featuring Italy's Lombardia region, which started on March 18th and will run through April 7th. Then they launched Uno Viaggio in Italia in summer 2020 to fill the void for the guests that have been unable to travel to the exciting and culturally rich regions of Italy. From the coast of Sicily to the peaks of the Italian Alps, the menus bring the smells and tastes of regional Italy to Milwaukee, with a new region and menu introduced every 3 weeks. You can view the full tasting menu and make your reservation at ristorantebartolotta.com. Easter is coming up in a week, and if you're still looking for the perfect Easter dinner or Easter brunch, our great Milwaukee restaurants have you covered. From Smoke Shack's smoked ham, Polish sausage, and brisket quiche to Black Shoe Hospitality's take and heat dinners for 2 or 4, and tons of delicious dessert options to Sanford's incredible curbside pickup Easter brunch, there are plenty of options to leave the cooking to someone else this holiday. But remember that these meals will all require a pre-order, so plan ahead so that you're all set on Easter Day. That reminds me, I have some calls to make after this. After many months of closure and much thoughtful preparation, the Charles Allis and Villa Terrace Art Museums are excited to announce their reopening to the public on Wednesday, March 31st. Admittance will be done by online reservation only, and visitors will be required to wear a face mask during their visit, as well as keep 6-foot social distancing from others when possible. Timed reservations will allow the museum to monitor capacity, giving visitors the social distance and time they need to explore the museums and the gardens. With the reopening of Villa Terrace comes a new exhibit, Villa Incognito, Latent Narratives in the Permanent Collection, curated by Shanna McGraw, Senior Curator, Charles Allis and Villa Allis Terrace Museums. The exhibit will be on view from March 31st through September 26th. Plum Media is teaming up with Milwaukee's own John McGivern to produce a new TV show. John McGivern's Main Streets will take people on a tour of the upper Midwest, stopping at towns in Wisconsin, Minnesota, Indiana, Illinois, and Iowa. One of his first episodes will include telling the story of Milwaukee's Harbor District and its bright and booming future. John McGivern will use his signature storytelling to showcase unique stops in each place that he visits, get to know the people, and share their stories, inspiring a positive connection within the communities, promoting tourism and enhancing the local economy. John McGivern's Main Streets will be airing in the January of 2022. Milwaukee public health experts and community leaders are coming together to answer questions about COVID-19 vaccines on Wednesday, March 31st at 7 p.m. The BIPOC communities are being disproportionately affected by the pandemic. To help address these challenges, Milwaukee Rep is hosting a free panel discussion on COVID-19 and vaccinations with local public health specialists and community leaders. Learn more about the current state of the pandemic and the importance of getting vaccinated from experts and leaders in Milwaukee. Plus, this live conversation includes time for virtual attendees to ask the panelists questions. Tune into this free event via Facebook Live or YouTube Live at MILW Rep. There's no denying that the tandem and Chef Caitlin Cullen have truly stepped up this past year to help feed our community, and they're still going. This Sunday, Cullen is organizing a free food festival for women in need and their families at Sherman Phoenix. This event, which has been made possible thanks to an incredible $80,000 sponsorship from the World Central Kitchen will offer food from 23 restaurants from 12 p.m. to 5 p.m. And Milwaukee is just one of 13 cities that is receiving this funding from the World Central Kitchen. And since it's International Women's Month, all of the participating restaurants are women owned. If you know anyone suffering from food insecurity, please make sure they know about this incredibly generous event on Sunday. A huge thank you to Caitlin Cullen, as well as Julie and Joanne from the Sherman Phoenix for continuing to take care of our community. I want to extend a giant thank you to the Milwaukee Symphony Orchestra for inviting the Visit Milwaukee staff to tour their brand new Bradley Symphony Center yesterday. This space is absolutely breathtaking, from the fully restored historic lobby and theater to the brand new event halls. I personally cannot wait to sit in one of the seats of the theater and enjoy a performance by the Milwaukee Symphony Orchestra or attend an event in this beautiful space. Bravo to the Milwaukee Symphony Orchestra and Mark Niehaus. If you are interested in hosting your next event, they're ready now to meet with you and show you the space. With a brand new catering company residence and an amazing event space, this is sure to be one of the top places to host your next event. And before we get into our presentation by David Mohammed about Cesar Chavez, a reminder that this upcoming Wednesday, March 31st, is the third annual Cesar Chavez birthday celebration hosted by the Marcus Performing Arts Center. This free virtual event will take place at 1 p.m. and will educate communities about the legacy of Cesar Chavez and demonstrate the excellence and resilience of our arts and education communities. No tickets or reservations are required. Just head to the Marcus Center's website next Wednesday and stream the event. Before I introduce our moderator, I just want to let you know that we will not be hosting our usual webinar next Friday, April 2nd, as it's Good Friday. Please enjoy the Easter weekend. We will resume our webinar on Friday, April 9th, continuing our Black Excellence series. We'll have a panel of some incredible Black women in our community to talk about their businesses. And now I would like to introduce Rafael Acevedo, Grant Compliance Manager with the City of Milwaukee. Rafael currently serves as the Grant Compliance Manager for the City of Milwaukee's Community Development Grants Administration Office. He is responsible for managing the City of Milwaukee's efforts to end homelessness. The city is the lead agency for the Continuum of Care, which provides over $15 million annually for homelessness services. Prior to his current role at the City of Milwaukee, Rafael worked for the Greater Milwaukee Foundation as a philanthropic advisor. He has over 25 years of experience in the nonprofit and government sectors, and he currently volunteers his time as a board member for Freighter. But we are most proud that he sits on our executive committee and the board of Visit Milwaukee. Rafael, take it away.
Hey, thank you, Peg. Much appreciated. Hello, everyone. Well, I have the distinct pleasure of introducing my good friend, David Mohammed. And we'll talk about the life and legacy of Cesar Chavez and the impact he has had in the Latino community and in Milwaukee and nationally. I've known David for over 20 years from our college days. David is currently the Deputy Director of the Department of Health and Human Services for Milwaukee County. David is deeply committed community leader who has dedicated his career to improving the quality of life for families and young people in our community. Before joining Milwaukee County, actually David worked for us at the City of Milwaukee as a program manager for the city's health department's Office of Violence Prevention. His important work had a lasting impact on community health and public safety. He expanded the county's trauma response team partnership, developed 414 Life, a violence interruption program staffed by credible messengers from the community, and oversaw engagement for the Blueprint for Peace, the city's first violence prevention framework. David channels his passion for the art and music into his professional roles at various civic-minded organizations around Milwaukee, developing creative and engaging curriculum and program design to reach young people from a place of authenticity. I could list the numerous awards and recognitions that David has received over the years, but we will probably be here for the next hour or so. So without further ado, I want to introduce my good friend, David Mohammed.
Thanks, Raphael. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. I want to thank the team at Visit Milwaukee for this opportunity. Can everybody hear me okay? I want to make sure my audio is good. A thumbs up or, okay. Okay, good. So I'm very happy to give this presentation. I don't typically get the opportunity to talk as much about heroes that inspire me and people that have had a connection and impact on my life. When I got the call from Raphael to do the presentation on Cesar Chavez, obviously his birthday is on the 31st of this month. And I think there are not as many visible figures of the civil rights movement from the Hispanic community that people might be aware of, and certainly none as visible as Cesar Chavez. And there's a significant impact that his inspiration and work has had on Wisconsin and on Milwaukee specifically. And I just wanted to cover some of that. If we can go to the next slide. Just the basics for folks who may or may not be familiar with Cesar Chavez. He was born March 31st, 1927 in Yuma, Arizona. He did a stint in the military, and after that became an organizer, was a trained organizer. Some folks might be familiar with Saul Alinsky and whatnot, some of the same folks whose schools of thought have really kind of developed grassroots organizing. And so in California, he was known heavily for working with multicultural coalitions, where you had the Filipino community, African Americans, and others who were heavily involved in farm work. He founded the National Farm Workers Association that turned into the Agricultural Workers Organizing Committee, and then those organizations merged and became what is known as the United Farm Workers Labor Union. Many might be familiar with Dolores Huerta, who was his sister-in-law, who was a leader in that movement as well. One movement that really kind of helped thrust them into the national spotlight was in the mid-60s because of the mistreatment and abuse of farm workers, migrant farm workers, particularly those of Mexican descent in California, where they were in subhuman conditions and often denied those benefits that should be provided to all who are citizens or reside in this country, and provide economic support and labor for what we eat and what we subsist on. And so what they did was, when the people who were working in the fields were being sprayed with pesticides and living in under abusive treatment, they organized the Delano Grape Strike, which asked people to boycott the purchase and consumption of grapes for a significant period of time. It lasted about 5 years and had a significant economic impact that helped bring the visibility of the farm worker struggle to the forefront in the civil rights movement and help inspire a generation of Latino leaders as well. He patterned his nonviolent tactics in much the similar way as Dr. King did after Mahatma Gandhi. He utilized tactics such as direct action, mass walkouts, protests, and hunger strikes or fast. And his politics were heavily influenced by his Catholic faith, but also his inspiration for social justice movements across the world. We can go to the next slide. Now, myself and my family, we had a personal connection with Cesar Chavez, not one that was terribly close, but my father did work with him on a couple of movement-based, I'd say, strikes or boycotts. And this is interesting for me. My family, we are not of Mexican descent. We're from Puerto Rico originally, and my father grew up on the East Coast. But my people, in terms of my ethnic community, we were heavily involved in migrant farm work on the East Coast. And so my father was an organizer. And when he married my mother, who came to school at UW-Madison, and I'm from Madison originally, and I've taken Milwaukee as my home. When he married her, he got involved with the organizing struggle out here. And so my father, that's me in the middle. You can see I'm so thrilled to be in the picture. I didn't really know I knew of Cesar Chavez, but I didn't know all about him. And, that was kind of my dad's thing. But this was something I was kind of born into. So next slide will help me kind of illustrate that. My father is actually in the picture where you see them marching, where he served as a security person for Cesar Chavez on some of these marches that they were doing to help bring visibility. There was another grape and strawberry boycott because of environmental conditions and the farm workers being exposed to cancer-causing pesticides. And so this was a major movement. And, when you're a kid and you can't eat grapes, you want to know why. And, it was not something that we really understood at the time, but now I appreciate much greater as it has helped inspire a commitment to social justice. And then you see in the other picture, my father and Cesar Chavez having a moment. We'll go on to the next piece. Now, in Wisconsin, there's a significant impact here. And although my father wasn't from here, he definitely embedded himself heavily with the migrant community here and the predominantly Mexican community here. It's very interesting when you look at the migration of Mexicans to the Mexican community to Wisconsin and how it follows this pattern of folks in the late 20s and the early 1930s, particularly during World War II, when you start seeing the need for labor and migrant labor because of the war effort. And so you start seeing what parallels in the Black community, the Great Migration. So you see folks coming up from Texas to Mexico to Michigan and other parts of the Midwest. 85% of those were from Texas, the ones who came to Wisconsin. And I want to talk a little bit about that because there's almost a sister city type connection between Milwaukee and Crystal City, Texas. This becomes an issue for the civil rights movement in this state because those things that would have protected laborers and employees from other unions, certainly that was not looked favorably upon for employees of color who were often used to break strikes. And so many of those New Deal and Fair Deal agreements and protections from the federal government were not afforded to workers of color, even though they were citizens. We'll go to the next slide. This comes to the forefront in Milwaukee and Wisconsin with the rise of individuals that I think are notable and are important for us to know. People like Jesus Salas, Dante Navarro, Ernesto Chacon, people like that who come up as young people, as children who've experienced the discrimination that was put upon migrant workers, particularly of Mexican and Latino descent. And so they organized off of the inspiration that they saw from Cesar Chavez and the United Farm Workers Movement, long walks to help protest and bring light to this. And in 1966, they organized what was called Obreros Unidos, or Workers United. And you'll hear terms like La Raza and La Causa, or La Raza literally meaning race, but it really more means the people or a cultural identity, and La Causa meaning the struggle of the people of Mexican descent and the farm worker movement. So in 1966, 5,000 members of Obreros Unidos, or the Workers United, walked to Madison to bring attention to the governor about discrimination for labor practices and the abuses and the conditions that farm workers were living in. And so this was a major mass mobilization that started from the rural communities that members of the migrant farm worker community were living in. And things take a different turn when Jesus Salas moves to Milwaukee. And we'll go to the next slide and talk a little bit about that. So in Milwaukee, he becomes involved with an organization that some of us might be familiar with, and that's UMOS, or the United Migrant Opportunity Services. And they start taking a more militant line stance in confronting racism in the city. Many of those folks that I talked about who migrated from Texas and other parts of the country took up residence in some of these smaller towns. But when things became more difficult and they were tired of the discrimination there, they moved into Milwaukee. Now, if you're studying any of the history, and I don't know if folks are history buffs here, I'm a big fan of John Gerda's books on Milwaukee. And you can see how the South Side has always been I'd say, landing point for immigrants, particularly when you look at the history of the Polish community in this city, and then the later waves of Latino immigration to Milwaukee. What is very interesting to me is that this comes to birth in the city during the same time as Father Grappi and the civil rights struggles for fair housing in Milwaukee, as well as the prevalence of Dr. King and his national movement. And so Jesus Salas starts to take on a more militant direction, and also forming coalitions with Puerto Ricans, many of whom find themselves on the east side of Milwaukee, but also some on the south side, and African Americans with the housing struggle. This led to later activism, particularly in 1970 at UWM and MPS, when you started seeing issues with regard to quality of education and the history of Latinos represented for Spanish-speaking and Latino students at UWM and MPS. And what happened at UWM was really significant. In the picture in the background, you can't see it too well, but there was a takeover of about 200 people in the chancellor's office at UWM. If you're familiar with UWM, you might know about the Roberto Hernandez Center and some of that history. Much of that work came about because of the activism that was springing up in that period of time. And then there were walkouts organized, similar to the strategies used by the United Farm Worker Movement with regards to MPS and the quality of education that Latino students were receiving. I'm going to pause right now and see if there's any questions. I don't know, Raphael, if you could give me an aid and assist. If you have questions, you can feel free to put them in the chat, but just go ahead and pause if you want me to elaborate on any points before I continue.
Yes, David, we do have one question in our chat, and I'll just read it off to you. I know you weren't very old at the time based on the photo of you and Mr. Chavez, but was there a time when you sort of realized this is history and change my history and change my children or grandchildren will be talking about, that your family was helping make history?
That's an excellent question. I will say this, I don't know how your children are, but I kind of give a download to them of all the things that their grandparents did, and I imagine that I can actually recall kind of rolling my eyes and hearing old war stories and stuff like that. But my father was heavily involved with a lot of different type of activism. He was involved with the Black Panthers and the Young Lords on the East Coast, which was a Puerto Rican offshoot of the Black Panthers. And so he grew up in New York City, hated city life, and loved the country. And he got that kind of sense of peace from when he was a child laborer as a migrant farm worker when Puerto Ricans from the city would do seasonal work on the East Coast. And so he would tell me these kind of stories. I always grew up seeing the images of Cesar Chavez, seeing the UFW flag, knowing it was a part of my cultural identity. But I was really more Transformers and G.I. Joe back then. And so when I met Cesar Chavez, I was meeting the person that I had heard about and connecting to the movement. But I also have to confess, I wanted to know why I couldn't eat grapes. I wanted to know why I couldn't eat strawberries. and that was, you have an emotional attachment to food. So I was early on being taught a level of self-sacrifice for a greater cause. And it didn't feel too great, but it definitely helped shape who I became. Any other questions?
I don't see any at this time, so we can.
Okay, awesome. So I think this is a good point for us to look at, because you're starting to see Latinos in Wisconsin take on a political stance and become much more visible. I think the most important thing about Cesar Chavez is that he helps elevate the visibility of Latinos. Oftentimes, particularly in places like Milwaukee, you hear civil rights and you hear social justice struggles only talked about in a black-white paradigm because of this country's history, and everybody in between kind of gets lost in the shuffle. But I think in Milwaukee, you started to see the Latino community flex a little bit, if I can use that term, particularly with the size, the growth of the community at that time, and their influence on local politics and economics. You had a lot of folks who worked in the tanneries. You had, the Allen Bradley Corporation, and you had a great deal of discrimination that was taking place, as well as conflict with other ethnic groups who were higher up in the social status in Milwaukee at that time. So this is an important story that helps shape the South Side that we see today, and the attachment that folks have to this city, a very significant one. Before I go on to the next slide, I just want to say, Milwaukee was not the city that I'm born in, but it was the city that I chose to live in because my wife, her father came from this kind of experience as a migrant farm worker from Texas. And so this is something that I feel connected to in that way also. Next slide. So that tees up the point that I was trying to make earlier. Jesus Salas is somebody who obviously makes a name for his work in Wisconsin, but his roots come from a small town in Texas. And as I mentioned earlier about the predominance of folks who are coming from Texas into Wisconsin and Milwaukee, it creates this back and forth relationship with the state of Texas, but particularly with one city in Texas, and that's Crystal City, Texas. If I could just tee this up right here. Many Mexicans came to Milwaukee from Crystal City, Texas. They were called Cristaleños, and that stays very strong. And I wanted to kind of mention, as you see the photo back here, this is Visit Milwaukee. And I think it's important to call out that Milwaukee has become a destination point for Latinos who retain that connection even when they move to other parts of the country. And there's plenty of folks who come back every year, obviously pre-pandemic and God willing, post-pandemic, they come back for Mexican Fiesta. And Mexican Fiesta becomes this gathering point, almost in the same way that folks do for Harley Davidson. Mexican Fiesta becomes a gathering point for people with connections to migrant farm work, the Midwest, and whose origins might be in Texas, or specifically Crystal City, Texas. It's become much broader than that. Obviously, as new waves of migration have hit or come to the city and the region, and that's a wonderful development. But it was really the foundation that was laid by these folks, inspired by social justice work, to create cultural celebrations that reflected community life. For our African-American brothers and sisters, we should look at this in the same way as folks coming from Arkansas or Mississippi, and many of the festivals that folks, the street festivals and different neighborhood festivals that folks look to, it has that feel and that vibe, and it's been a beautiful thing for Milwaukee, for folks of all backgrounds. Next slide. So another piece, and as I was asked to do this presentation, I thought about all of the things that really are the outgrowths of social justice and civil rights movements that help inspire generations to stay committed to change. And when you really want to look at what the arts and culture mean to a community, it really is the outgrowth of that people's thinking about themselves, about their celebrations of culture, and about how they relate to other communities and what they want people to see about them. And so murals in Milwaukee is really a mural city, where you can go in any part of the city and see murals that tell the story of the different groups that have helped struggle and create the distinct culture and flavor of Milwaukee in the Midwest. I think it's very significant and distinct from other cities in the Midwest, even though we get compared to other cities in what's called the Rust Belt. So everybody knows this mural right here. It used to be the Esperanza Unida building. It's now the Mercantile Lofts building. And I'm very grateful that those, when they changed hands, that they kept that mural, because that mural really is like the welcome sign to Milwaukee. For many people, when they see this mural, they know that it represents something, but they may not know the history of it. When it was designed, I think it was in the early 90s, late 80s, it was supposed to represent the aspirations of Milwaukee's immigrant communities on the South Side. One of the reasons it makes almost like a mnemonic or subconscious connection to the Latino community is the use of the eagle. Although we also know that it is a symbol of America, it is also a symbol of Mexico. It is also a symbol of the UFW. And so you start to see the struggle for civil rights reflected in ways that people can identify with from various backgrounds. And I think that's something significant. The South Side of Milwaukee is the most diverse part of the city. And I did see a comment in the chat. People love this mural. I do, and I'm glad that it's still there, even though the windows are in there now. Next slide. Again, with the theme on murals, I think it's important to also call up the arts movement that has sprung up as there's been a renaissance of the South Side and of Latino culture in the South Side. A lot of that credit, we mentioned UMOS earlier. I would be remiss if I did not mention UCC. Many of those same people who came from Texas, their ancestors or not their ancestors, their relatives are those who populated Walker Square, as well as many of the services that helped develop into what is known as the United Community Centers and the Bruce Guadalupe schools. You see a lot of murals there. You see a lot of culture represented and reflected there. But that culture starts becoming something that reflects youth culture and graffiti culture, which is not vandalism, but public space art in many respects when it's done in partnership with business and economic development. And one organization that really helped advance that, I know you all have partnered with, is True School. True School was a hip hop urban arts and is a hip hop urban arts based organization. And they were behind this mural, which you see on 16th and Washington. There's a lot of history in there that I want to kind of draw attention to. In the upper corner, you see the image of Jesus Salas and some of his history written there. Then in the middle box, you see Cesar Chavez. So you see the local connection, and then you see the national inspiration. But then you see Marshall Vega. And I don't know if we have time, but Rafael, you can add some commentary to this. Marshall Vega represents the intergenerational connection, because before it was called Cesar Chavez, it was just 16th Street. And, you know, as young people, we might have gone to Envisions or some other places or Jalisco's or the old El Rey, but there was a fight to rename that street. Why don't you go ahead and speak to that? And there's a question from Meg about it being blank. I didn't have a picture, but it actually has Marshall's history on it. But since it's blank here, I'll let Rafael give it.
Yeah, no, thank you, David. It's interesting when I was talking to David last night about this presentation and the name Marshall Vega came up. I knew Marshall. He worked for the Spanish Journal back then. He was a reporter, but he was very passionate about renaming. It was actually the first crack at renaming a street in Milwaukee to Cesar Chavez was actually Lapham Boulevard, from like 1st Street to 16th Street. And that's where, you know, you have South Division. That was, and at that time I was a student. So, and I was doing some organizing back then. And I was actually helping Marshall collect signatures, because you need to collect so many signatures from property owners in order to rename a street. We had some resistance from some owners on Lapham Boulevard. So we decided to move, and Marshall made the decision to say, well, let's try 16th Street. And that was probably one of the best decisions we made back then, because as you know now, 16th Street is kind of the mecca of Latino owned businesses in Milwaukee, with restaurants and grocery stores and all types of businesses. So yeah, so that historical connection that I have with that, renaming of 16th Street to Cesar Chavez to do the work of Marshall Vega. So very fascinating.
We'll go to the next slide to further vindicate Marshall and Rafael's activism from back in the day. Just a couple more murals. This one in the middle that's behind the Milwaukee Murals Tell Latino History is called the Universal Seed. You see the corn coming up. You see some of that reflected there. That's actually on Cesar Chavez as well. In the upper corner, you see Si Se Puede, which is the farm worker chant. There's like a clap that everyone does, which is on beat, so that it amplifies the strength of numbers. And they chant Si Se Puede, meaning yes, we can, or yes, you can. And that is also on the corner right in front of El Rey. Uh, the other mural is not in the 16th Street area, but there you see a portrait of Lupe Martinez and Jesus Salas as he currently looks, who both reflect the work that UMOS has done among other organizations. We'll go to the next slide. I think it's also important to shout out initiatives like the Clark Square Neighborhood Initiative, the Cesar Chavez bid, and the work that has been done because it did lay the foundation for newer arrivals who came either from Central America, from the Caribbean, from other cities in Puerto Rico, and other cities actually in Mexico, and less from the Southwest. Meg asked a question. If you could read that for me, Rafael. You're on mute. That's the quote.
Don't you just love that?
I love
Can
it.
you describe the growing
the
the growing Latino diversity in Milwaukee area and diversity of areas of the city where Latinos are choosing to live?
Excellent question. And this is significant when you see this march in the background. That is Voces de las Fronteras, May 1st, May Day March for El Día Sin Latinos, so the day without Latinos. There's one typically done in May and another done in October to show the economic impact and fight for immigrant rights. This is something that has really helped evolve the farm worker movement, which initially did not receive the immigrant issue as well. But this is something significant to the question, because you're starting to see a lot more folks coming from, I would say, economic, environmental, and civil strife in other countries in Latin America that find opportunity here. Unfortunately, and I think I can say this safely, nobody's coming for the weather, except if they're coming in the summertime. But those groups that are coming, as we stated, from Honduras, from Guatemala, from Nicaragua, from the Caribbean, like the Dominican Republic, other folks from Puerto Rico. Rafael and I were talking about how our families came from Puerto Rico. And it's different from the earlier waves of immigration, and it might be for different reasons. But what it has done is increase the Latino population between 1990 and 2014, more than 213% it's increased. So that's a significant 20-year growth. 73% of Latinos in Milwaukee, even though we're speaking about the immigration piece, 73% of them are US born. So they might be the children of immigrants, or they might be folks from within the boundaries of the United States. But this is significant because it's a higher portion than in most large metropolitan areas. There's actually more Latinos living in metropolitan Milwaukee than there is in Los Angeles. So something about the demographic shift of Milwaukee. Now, Hispanic businesses in that same period grew more than 82% in a 5-year span from 2007 to 2012. And ownership of business is significant. Home ownership is low. So there's definitely demographic growths and shifts that are going to take place. It's significant to note that the generation gap or the age gap, this population of the Latino community skews young, maybe 35 and under, and maybe even bigger, 18 and under, when in comparison to the older white or European population of Milwaukee, which is 65 and up by and large. And so this is something that's going to be not only Milwaukee's present, but it is Milwaukee's future. Next slide. And we're in the home stretch. I think this is important to call out. Cesar Chavez started as a labor organizer. This is something significant for us when you look at the economic development that has taken place in Latino Milwaukee. And it is really what makes it a draw. I have family members who drive from other parts of the state because they don't have the grocery options for the ethnic palette that we have in Milwaukee. I grew up Before we had stores like this in Madison, I grew up taking weekend trips to come and buy plantains at El Rey and things that we couldn't find elsewhere. How is this validated? Let's look at this. In 2001, UWM did a study that showed the spending power within the South Side, particularly in the 16th Street area, as 675 million annually in retail purchases. The purchasing power in the 53204 zip code, which is the most dense zip code in terms of population and the youngest zip code in the state, has a spending power of about 91 million each year on 16 retail categories. That was reported in the Business Journal. And then we already gave the stat on business. So we can go to the next slide. And obviously you see the statue, the bronze statue of Cesar Chavez. I'm going to end my presentation with a quote that I think summarizes this work and summarizes the life of Cesar Chavez. We cannot seek achievement for ourselves and forget about progress and prosperity for our community. Our ambitions must be broad enough to include the aspirations and needs of others for their sakes and for our own. I think that exemplifies the work of multicultural coalition building, of a defense of social justice, while at the same time advocating for workers' rights and the kind of economic development that supports mobility inside of oppressed communities. So I will stop there and take any questions if there's time, but I appreciate this opportunity.
Yeah, I don't see any other questions in the chat.
Okay.
Thank you, David. Amazing. I'm going to pass it over to Meg. Thank you.
Thank you to both of you for coming on and giving us the benefit of your own personal childhoods and roots in Milwaukee. And thanks for introducing a nice, deep presentation on Cesar Chavez. David, it is obvious that Cesar Chavez meant so much, not only to Milwaukeeans in our past, but also will continue to do so as we see the growth in the future. So thank you to you both, and have a wonderful weekend, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.
Great.